Do you feel like you are so close to meeting your future husband? You are collecting the signs. You feel like God has been revealing, giving you little treasure hunt hints. He's almost here, confirmations, prophetic words. And yet, year after year, you still find yourself single. Well, that was me. That was my story. And looking back now, I realized there were 5 powerful signs that were showing me, revealing that my husband was on his way and that I was, in fact, going to meet him that very year. However, I had to do a few things that most people don't realize they have to do to actually receive their love story. So let's talk about it. Ladies, I was that girl before I met my husband who my YouTube search bar history was filled with things like kingdom marriage, kingdom spouse, God ordained mate, future husband from God, any kind of kingdom marriage video, I binge watched and I probably saw it if it was probably before 2021 or the year of. And I was just on this search, on this hunger, like looking like God, searching for breakthroughs. What is it that you want to reveal? What needs to be shifted? I know I'm going to have this kingdom marriage that I keep praying about, that I know that you put that desire in my heart to have. And I prayed, I watched videos, I fasted, I did everything that you are doing already. And still, years went by and nothing was clicking. And then something finally started to shift within me. I started to notice when the signs actually turned into internal shifts. And that is the year 2021 when I met my husband. So let's go into some of these fun examples. I just thought of this video recently and I was like, oh yeah, like that's so cool. Like I had the coolest signs, and that was the year that I met my husband. So let's start with the first example. The first sign was a prayer that a lady prayed for me, and that's when I think that something internally started to shift. So this was probably, I don't know, probably April, May of 2021, and I went to some church, small gathering, not even my local church, some other church, small group of people. People came together and were sharing testimonies about God, prophetic words, visions, what God's doing in their life. I've always been so excited, just a fan of experiencing God and the supernatural in real life. And during that meeting, one of the pastor's wife comes in. She was like an older lady, and he's like, "Oh, guys, here's my wife." Forgot her name, but here's my wife. She actually has an anointing, speaking of gifts, where for some reason, every time she prays, within 6 months, singles, a person who's a single person, they meet their spouse, their mate, within 6 months. And I was like, what? Hello? This is for me. She came here for me, or I came here for. And I was like, oh my gosh, I want to get a prayer. And then instantly I had some thoughts and some doubts come into my heart, like, oh, that's kind of weird. You're just gonna like ask for a prayer, and I don't want to be that girl that's chasing around and asking to be prayed for because I'm single. But I never was that type of girl. I was never the type that would be, begging for prayers or something like that for, to be married. Yes, it was a desire. But in that moment, I decided that I'm going to, I don't like actually boldly and courageously own my desire first and foremost, and actually come up to her and ask for a prayer, because like why would that hurt me, right? And so after the meeting, I came up to her and I said, hey, I would love to receive a prayer. I am single, praying for my godly mate. So if you could pray for me, thank you. And she said a quick short prayer. And in that moment, I took it as something has shifted. I took it as, this is for me. I am serious about this. And later on, when I did the math, I had no idea if I was going to meet my husband or not. But when I did the math later, when I did meet my husband that year, sure enough, within that 6-month span of her anointing, it was activated. I met my man. So that was the first fun sign of that year. Now, the second sign is something that definitely involved childlike faith, but I received it, and it's probably one of my exciting stories that I've had. That, in my opinion, was a foreshadowing spiritual moment of what was to come. So In the earlier example, I talked about later a lady praying for me, and I don't believe that that was a coincidence. In fact, I don't think any of these signs were coincidences. I don't believe in that at all. So in this situation, I think it was about a month or so later, I was at a park with a friend. She was in town, and we were catching up. And we were outside. There was these long swinging benches, amazing. And we're catching up about life, like what God is doing in your life, my life. What are we praying for? What do we desire? Of course, we talked about our future husbands and missions, and everything romantic relationships. And we were both single, but I was telling her, like, I don't know, there's something about this year. And, in some ways, I'd say that every year, but no, that year, something was, like, I felt was different. And so we prayed for each other because we were wrapping up our conversations or chit chats. And as soon as she finished praying for my hot, holy, handsome husband, and I received it, not even 5 minutes later, there's this young high school boy who I saw kind of walking around. He comes up to me and he seemed kind of shy and was kind of hesitant, but he came up to me and said, excuse me, can I ask you a question? And I'm like, yes. And he's like, and he gets down on one knee and says, will you marry me? And I was like, oh my gosh, oh my God. We were just talking about marriage and, getting proposed to. And I saw some girls giggling in the background, and I realized they were all together. And so I said, yes, yes. And I reached my hand out, and he, shaking with his little hand quivering, takes out this tiny little ring and shows it to me. And my friend's like, no, you got to put it on her finger. Like, you started this, you finished this process, put it on. And he was just like laughing and putting it on. And I just like boldly held out my arm, receiving, building my faith even more, imprinting this energy. And it was so funny because it was just a group of young high school kids playing a scavenger hunt, and they had these exercises where, well, one of them, that one was, you have to ask a stranger to marry you, and if they say yes to your proposal, then you can mark off that assignment and move on to your next quest. And so, like, for him, it was just like, he's playing his game. And for me, I'm like, okay, I see you, God. Like, I received this prophetic confirmation yet again. And I do believe, the Bible talks about it's up to, God hides mysteries, but it's up to us to engage in that relationship and seek out these revelations, right? Make these discoveries. And it's kind of like a little scavenger hunt throughout life. Anytime I've prayed for anything, I've, collected these little signs. So we took some photos. Actually, my friend was, I guess, the engagement photographer's shoe. It just happened. She captured that moment. I'm going to share these photos with you ladies to build up your faith. It's just so candid, so in the moment. I've had like a practice proposal situation. And that, those photos, to me, it just solidified that excitement, the anticipation for the faith that, what God started, it's going to happen. And I did tell my husband when I did meet him, I said, okay, when you propose, but I'm just letting you know that I have been proposed to before. He's like, what? So that was a fun story to tell him. Anyways, let's go to the next sign. So the third sign kind of relates to the second one that I shared about the proposal. I had another situation. Another friend was in town just a few more months later in the summer, 2021, and we went on a little walk. We were by a lake. And there was this trail that led to a bench. Oh, there's something about benches, I guess. And I sat down. I said, okay, let's pause. Let's sit down here. And I've never sat there. And it overlooks the lake. It's small little, I don't want to say cliff, but, it just kind of goes down where the lake is. And we're talking, catching up, probably talking about guys, relationships, husbands. Well, she was married. I was awaiting. And we sat down, and I looked down, and there's something kind of red. And all of a sudden, I'm like, hold up, paused her story, got up, and I looked over, and I could not believe it was a dozen long stem red roses on the ground. And I had never even seen long stem roses, not like those. I mean, they were beautiful. Clearly, unfortunately, probably someone's proposal did not go well, went wrong, but it went well for me because I collected those flowers. They were so fresh. They were not wilted. They had a little bit of dust on some of them, but I picked most of them up. I don't even know if it was a dozen, but they were beautiful. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's another sign. It's another sign. I'm getting married. So, and we were just like, I told her about the other proposal situation I had. Now I'm like collecting these long stem flowers. I'm like, what am I being prepared for? This is so exciting. And it wasn't about me chasing these signs or making something happen. I just used them all to continue to activate my faith, to continue. Like, I mean, I went from like, I wish, I hope, but something that year was like, okay, it's happening. Like, it's happening. Like, this is like, how more clear can you get, God? I am ready to receive what I'm praying for. I have no idea how, but let's do this. So that was another really cool, fun sign. And of course, I need to show photos. So ladies, be encouraged. And let me tell you, anything in life, this is some random advice that I have for you. Anytime you are celebrating something special, a memory, an experience, something beautiful, pause and take a picture of that moment or a little video, because you never know if it's something that's going to continue to remind you or build up your faith, or it's something that you can then share with other people about your testimony of how God moves in your life, because obviously these are really cool stories when we're connected with God. Okay, so the fourth sign. This was now August 2021, and I went to a friend's wedding. I was 29 years old. In a few months, I was going to turn 30. And let me tell you, okay, when all your friends are starting to get married and you are exiting one decade of life and entering the other, if you know, right? And I don't know. So I had this, feeling like, I don't know, this is the year, and the year is kind of approaching to an end. Well, the summer was, at least. And I went to the wedding, and they had games, and one of the games was bingo. And on the game, the squares, right? Those areas, the spaces that you fill in, you could put in, block off one of the squares if you were single. Yeah, that was not a square that I wanted to have the privilege of blocking off. I could have done without it. And, in my whole table of people, everyone was married but me and a lot younger girl. But the interesting thing is, ladies, this wasn't like a bitterness, woe is me, pity party, victim mode. I'm like, okay, you know what? I'll put down this square as single, but this is the last time I'm marking or identifying as single. I just knew that I'm claiming my new identity. I'm no longer a single woman. I am now a woman who's preparing at the brink of experiencing relationship. So that was actually indeed the last time I was able to say that I'm single. That was the last wedding I went to when I was not in a relationship. So to me, that was another really cool marker, a sign of this is the last time, or, we're getting close here. It's kind of like birthing a baby, right? You go through these trimesters, milestones, and you know that it's coming. So anyways, that's another really fun story, but let's go to the next sign. The last sign. The last sign was a sign that really, I could even say, was the beginning of the actual shift. So I hope you guys can see the pattern. Like, we go from signs to shifts. Signs on the outside, we can see things, but the shift has to happen on the inside. And I had been going to a church for my entire life, the same one, with my family. A lot of my friends had married or moved, or I started to realize, as much as I love being in this church, and I was involved in ministries, and I'm not one to just up and go and leave and next. When I get involved, I commit myself. And yet I just, in my heart, I was like, and this has been a decision that had been brewing for a long time. I'm like, something in me is telling me it's time for me to end this ministry. Not that I'm never going to go to this church again, but I need to branch out and widen my community, like go into new places. And there was another church that was newly opened, and they had more people my age. And I wasn't necessarily going to that church to find my husband. No, it was not chasing a husband, but I was like, well, I have to be available to people, like-minded people. I want friends. I want a community. And if there's a guy in that setting, that's wonderful. But the point is, for me to even get to a point where I just started to transition seasons with my job, with church. I was like, gosh, something has to be going on. By the way, I did not meet my husband at that church. I met him in a completely different way. More to that later. But my point was, on the outside, things were definitely starting to change, and I could not deny it, because it wasn't like, I'm going to change churches, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, right? It was like, whoa, something is shifting, and then this church starts to open up, and then I gravitate there. Now, speaking of kingdom videos, kingdom marriage videos that I binge watched, there was this woman that I found that I loved. I loved her work. I loved her prophetic ministry. I loved who she was. And I remember listening to one of her videos, and it talked about the appointed season is coming quickly. And that was the year I watched her video. I'm not saying watching all these videos are bad. It's great when it activates your faith, but it's even better when you shift and do something about it to come in alignment with what you desire. But something that was deposited within me that I was like, wow, like, could it be that, by this time next year, something is going to actually change, and I'm not just waiting season after season after season. But she had said, there comes an appointed time when, once God deposits a certain seed, a promise, again, pregnancy metaphor, it will come into fruition. It comes into manifestation. And she brought this example of even Abraham. He had been desiring a child for his entire life, and then he comes into his very old age. He's already given up on that dream, and a couple, angels, lords, however you want to say it, people came to him and said, by this time next year, you will have a child. And at that point, he's like, yeah, thanks. I don't know. I kind of gave up on that. His wife just kind of laughed in disbelief, also, let go of that. And the interesting thing is, it doesn't matter if you're laughing in disbelief. It doesn't matter if you just give up. There comes a time when the Lord says, it is time. And it's only a matter of time, due season, for the manifested works to come into fruition. And so you have to then start to go into active prep, because it's happening. And so in my life, I was like, I've watched all these videos. I have journals of what I believe God is speaking to me about, collecting, these fun signs. But you're right. There is a point where the season of manifestation, it has to come. If you plant a seed, it has to prosper at some point. Like, could this really be the season? That's when my faith went from, I believe, could it be, to certainty. I'm not wishing anymore. I'm knowing it. And now I'm realizing I have to come together and partner with the supernatural and the natural to make this supernatural combination, so that God can bring in the love story that I had been praying for forever about. Now, here's the thing. It wasn't just about collecting signs, because I was not interested anymore in collecting more signs for, another year. And something finally changed. And the truth is, I changed. And that's when everything changed. I stopped waiting, and I started to actively prepare. And, that's when everything changed, because the truth is God cannot give you what your heart is blocking, no matter how much you desire it and how much you pray for it and say you want it. And so, yeah, God was preparing me for marriage all these years. I do believe it. There's a lot of, faith building and growth that happened. Yes, my faith was very real. And guess what? I still had to take real action, and that's sometimes the final step that we omit or neglect. Like we pray on it for God, but we forget that we have a co-creation, active participation with God. And so, okay, I stopped just watching these videos about kingdom marriage and, and the promises about having a God ordained spouse. And I actually invested in coaching, in transformation, in inner work. I started to do all of the inner work, the healing that's necessary to unblock my heart from the fears. I had to let go of control, subconscious wounds, any kind of block, any kind of wound, anything, any kind of guardedness that was holding, pushing love away, keeping love out. I did not even recognize how much inner work I had to do to shift things around to bring in the kingdom marriage. And this is what I believe. You want kingdom blessing, any kind of kingdom blessing, you got to do some kingdom work on the inside. And I don't think that this is something that's a suggestion. I think it's a requirement, especially if we have to steward God's blessings. And so I finally became the woman who was ready to receive the love that I prayed for. And little did I know that my investment into this process of transforming, going on the inside to do the inner healing work that's necessary, I cannot believe how quickly I actually made room and opened the doors for God to bring my man into my life. Over there, see him? This is my top favorite photo. I had to print it, blow it up. I look at it, I love it. Oh my gosh. But I met my man September 2021. And I started to work with that coach. End of August is when I started to say, I'm ready. I'm ready to do this deep inner work. Ladies, I'm going to be honest with you. I would not have been ready before. In fact, I wasn't ready back then. And as soon as I said, you know what, I'm ready, and I'm ready to come with God, to open up and receive my blessing, I could not believe how quickly my entire life shifted. And I met the real guy, my man. And if the only thing I wish that I could do different now going back, I wish I would have been open and ready to receive this type of intense breakthrough help earlier in my life. And I think back a lot, I understand God purposed all of that, the wilderness, the journey, but I wish someone could have taught me this earlier. I wish I knew I could reach out and find help to open myself up. And that way I could have started my marriage earlier. I wish I had the ability to have created even more memories by now, started a family even earlier. I mean, I'm so blessed because when I met my husband, September of 2021, I can't even believe how awesome the dates were coming together of more things that I desired, because I actually learned how to co-create my desires with Christ. I share this story all the time throughout my videos, but I wanted to be in an official relationship for the first time in my life with the guy that I was going to marry by my 30th birthday. And guess who asked me to be his girlfriend officially on my birthday? I didn't tell him that. And somehow God, like when we understand our role in co-creating our desires with God, I mean, they start to happen by the detail, but oftentimes even better than we wanted. 1 year later, we got engaged. March 2023, we got married. Cannot believe it's now almost 2 years. What in the world? How fast does time fly? And we've been so blessed to welcome our sweet baby boy Adam, October of 2022. And I just want to encourage you, ladies, if you are still watching this and you know deep inside this is speaking to you and it is your time, I want you to take that energy and do something about it, because I can promise you when you do the inner work, God will, that's when we move mountains, literally, to receive what we want. And so I created a free training called Activate Your Feminine Charm. And I love teaching women how to truly become that woman who's so in tune with her feminine power, who's so irresistible to that deep masculine man that she is desiring. And, in that training, I walk you through the hidden blocks that keep us strong, successful, high achieving women, sometimes struggling to attract that masculine, godly man that we desire, because we don't want just any guy. We want a specific type of guy, right? And I teach how to shift from magnetic feminine energy into, or excuse me, ladies, how to shift into that feminine magnetic energy to draw in real devotion, because that's one of the most incredible feelings that you can have as a girlfriend, fiance, as a wife. Oh my gosh, like the way God created the world will only counterfeit what kingdom marriage really, really is like. And I teach you, ladies, waiting. We're not just waiting. This isn't just a waiting season. We are preparing actively for your heart to receive exactly what you are praying for. So ladies, click the link below. By the way, if you're still watching this video, which I know you are, I would love for you to drop in the comment section, drop in like your guys' signs, different confirmations, prophetic words, things you've experienced, promises from God. I want all of you to share collectively what God is doing in your life and activate and encourage everyone in your journey. I would love to see your girls' comments. So make sure check out my free training. Make sure to check out my video. And I am so excited to see you in the next video, where I will continue to share with you what's changed my life so that you can also receive the abundance and the love that you desire.